Hi there and welcome. It's Jennifer McGuire. I haven't done a video in a while because I took some time off to spend with my family over the holidays. I hope you all had a good couple weeks. Today I have a video showing how you can cut a bunch of die cut craft foam pieces and create your own background stamp that you can use over and over again. I have lots of tips and techniques and tricks to share along the way also. I also wanted to apologize if this video doesn't seem like it's put together all that well. I had a little assistance from my brand new puppy. She was here while I was trying to do this video, and I tell you, she wanted to play, so I had to jump around a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I have my sentiment piece that I'm going to create first. I wanted to create the sentiment first so I could kind of plan how big I wanted my card to be. So I'm using this on the edge die from Simon Says Stamp. It says thank you. I'm putting a little mark between the words because I actually only want to cut the U part. So this creates like a straight edge with the letters U sitting on it. And you'll see that in a moment. So I'm going to tape this along some black cardstock close to the edge, not right up against it, but about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. I'm going to put the tape in place. Now I'm going to take my cutting plate and put that up against that black line. So see how it's lined up with that black line there? Anything under the cutting plate will cut. Anything outside of the cutting plate won't. So I'm only cutting the word U. So you'll see here that I end up with the word U cut with a line across the bottom. So now I just need to cut that line and make it longer. I didn't want to cut the word thank you, just the word you. So I'm taking a straight edge. I'm just using my T-ruler. It's probably better to use a metal straight edge and a craft knife to continue those lines. You could also use your trimmer, or you can use just a pair of long scissors. So here I'm just trimming that off. I didn't cut all the way through there. And you can see I end up with a long strip with the word U kind of sitting on top. It looks attached there. Now I need to go ahead and add my sentiment. So I have this new sentiment stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. The die is also from them. And I'm stamping the words "are fantastic" underneath it with Versamark ink. I first used my anti-static powder tool so that the embossing powder didn't get everywhere. And now I'm adding my favorite white embossing powder, that's Hero Arts, and heat setting it with my heat gun. So now I have my little sentiment strip ready. When I did this, I decided that the sentiment looked better on a smaller note card. So I created a bunch of note cards that are 3.5 by 4.5. I ended up using this style sentiment on some of the cards and another style sentiment on a few others, which I'll show you at the end of this video. Let's now go ahead and create our background stamp. So I've cut a piece of scrap paper that is 4 inches by 2.5 inches. That's slightly wider than our note card and slightly taller than half the height of our note card. So basically this is a little bit bigger than half of the card. I'm going to create a background stamp that I'll stamp twice on the background, once on the bottom, once on the top, and that'll save me some time, which you'll see. I could have done a full-size background stamp, but this saves me time. Now I have a Stick-It product here. This is a very thin double-sided tape. I like it because you can put things on it and remove it easily until you press it down firmly. So I'm going to put a Stick-It on one side of this scrap piece of paper. This scrap piece of paper I want you to think of as like the wood block on a background stamp. So now we need to create the tiny little die cuts that I'm going to add to this for our stamping. So I'm using this new die set from Simon Says Stamp. It has a bunch of super tiny flowers and leaves. These are great for little accents on cards. I'm going to die cut it several times from some white craft foam. This is the stuff we played with as a kid. It has some dimension to it. It's great for creating accents. It die cuts beautifully. It's inexpensive. I really like this product. I'm just going to die cut this cluster of flowers, which you could cut apart and use individually if you wanted to. I'm going to die cut it several times, so I have lots of little flowers and leaves. Now you'll notice I'm kind of lining them up so they die cut close together on this background. The only reason I'm doing that is I want to maximize how many little flowers and leaves I can cut from one piece. And also I want to save the negative space, that whole big piece that you see there, for another card. So I'm trying to kind of piece it together so that there's no overlapping. Now I can pop all those little flowers and leaves out and put them in a little bowl so I don't lose them. By the way, this craft foam piece was cut to 4.25 by 5.5 so I could save that negative space, as I mentioned, for a card, and it's a perfect size. Okay, now it's time to put all these little flowers onto that sticky piece of cardstock that we created. I'm going to put the flowers down, being sure to go right up against the edge because I want to create a complete background stamp. And I'm going to put a little space in between each of them. Now this took me probably about 15 minutes to put together, which is quite a bit of time. However, I'm not doing any Copic coloring, and I also plan to use the stamp on many cards. You'll see I do, I think, like 12 cards in this video, and I also made 24 additional backgrounds for cards that I'm going to create later. So I felt it was worth the time to take to create all of these. Now, if you don't have stick-it adhesive, that double-sided tape that I use, you can use any adhesive for this background. You could use whatever tape runner you may have, or even glue stick or any other double-sided tape. So try whatever you have on hand. I just like the stick-it because you can kind of move things around afterwards, which you'll see me do in a little bit here. Since I'm making so many cards with this little background stamp that I created, I'm using the Misty stamping tool. I just find it's really helpful for many things, including when you're making lots of cards and when you want to make sure you stamp something perfectly. If you don't have the Misty stamping tool, you could take this little background stamp that we created, tape it onto an acrylic block, and just stamp with it as you would any stamp. You could even use a stamp positioner to get good placement. However, I find that the Misty is really helpful here. Now, as far as whatever tape you want to use to tape this to your Misty or your acrylic block, you can use any kind of tape runner or anything, any dry adhesive. I'm using Be Creative tape because it comes off the plastic pretty easy. This is a super strong tape when you're going paper to paper, but it works good here to put this temporarily into my Misty for stamping. Now I have my 3.5 by 4.5 inch top folding white note cards that I created, and I'm putting it down into my Misty along the bottom edge, and I'm just doing it 2 grid marks over from the left edge. I just want to make sure that I always position my card there every time I do this. Now I'm taking the release paper off of my stamp. I'm laying it face down right over the top half of my card. So now I've got it positioned exactly where I want it to be. You'll see it's pink because I tested it out. Don't worry, I just wanted to make sure it worked before I showed you all. I'm just placing it over the top half of my card. Now I'm going to close the door on my Misty, and this will attach that little background stamp onto the door of the Misty. So you can see it's perfectly positioned. So now that when I ink that up, it'll stamp perfectly on the top half of my card. So I have those little magnets that are holding my card into place so that every time I stamp it perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and ink that up with some Hero Arts pink ink. You could really use pretty much any ink for this. I'm using dye inks today. You can see I didn't stamp real well there in the inside edge, so I just re-inked it and I'm pressing it down again. And I get a nice, great image, all using little die cuts. It's hard to believe that wasn't a background stamp that I bought. Now I'm going to flip it over and do the exact same thing. And now I'm going to stamp the bottom half of the card. So I could have created a background stamp that covered the whole card, but that would have taken twice as long to glue all those little die cuts down. So I'm cheating and doing half of the card at once. Again, I didn't ink it up really well. I don't know what my problem is here, but I was having trouble with that. So I just did it again, and there we have an entire background created. Now this example shows all the flowers created with the same color. So you can create a background like that with any foam die cut pieces, but I wanted to show you can use multiple colors for a background like you see in that example. So for these examples with multiple colors of flowers, I'm just going to go ahead and remove some of the flowers and keep them in a little bowl here. I'm just kind of taking some from here and there. It doesn't really matter. That stick-it's really good about kind of letting go of those little foam pieces so I can have some open areas. That way, when I ink this up and stamp it onto my card, there will be some open areas where I can stamp other colored flowers later. So this is kind of stepping up the complexity, and it seems very complex for one card, but since I was making so many, it really was worth the effort to do this. So I'm inking this up. You'd be surprised how well this craft foam takes the ink and how well it stamps. It really works quite nicely. So I'm just going to press that down, and there we have the top half of our card stamped. And then we can flip the card over and stamp the bottom half of the card. Every time I just want to be sure that I've got my card pushed up against the bottom edge of the Misty and 2 grid lines over, just making sure that's positioned the same place every time so that we can do this technique and make sure everything lines up nicely. So there we have a complete background with some open areas where we can stamp other colored flowers. And I'm going to do this on a few different cards. I think I did 2 or 3 of each color combination. Now, if you decide you want to change colors and do something different, I found that you can clean the craft foam pretty well. You don't clean it completely. It does stain. But what I do is I just stamp it off a bunch. I just kind of rub paper over it. You can use baby wipe if you want to try to clean it. But I find just stamping it off works good, and you can switch to a different color easily. The second color that I'm using for these background flowers is Hot Lips. It's kind of a pinkish, reddish, orangish color. It's not a big jump from the pink that we just used, so I really didn't have to clean my stamp too much. But surprisingly, it really stamps quite well. These craft foam, they actually stamp well and kind of hold up well. Even though I did so many backgrounds, they held up well, and I didn't find that they were kind of fading on me. The craft foam, though it isn't as durable as like a rubber stamp or a clear stamp, it worked great for this purpose. After doing a few background cards with the Hot Lips color, I'm switching over to a completely different color. So I want to kind of make sure I get as much of that pink color off. I decided to try using the baby wipe, but I really think all you need to do is stamp it off and kind of wipe it off on scrap paper, and that really cleans it up enough. So now I'm going to come in with Simon Says Stamp Scuba ink. This is a beautiful kind of teal color. I'm going to ink that up, and before I stamp it on my card, I'm going to stamp it onto some scrap paper a couple times just to make sure that none of that pink is showing through. After I'm sure that we're good to go with the scuba color, I can go ahead and ink it up and stamp it onto another note card, doing the same process that I've done several times before. So after I have finished doing some cards with this color, I went ahead and did another set of cards using a blue ink. This is Blue Jay from Simon Says Stamp. So I had some nice blue backgrounds also. So once I had all of those backgrounds done, it's time to do those flowers that fill in the spaces. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these little craft flowers. I've done all the backgrounds I want with this background. I'm going to remove them all. If you wanted to preserve that background for future cards, you could just create another little sticky back piece of cardstock to do this step if you wanted to. I'm positioning the card in the MISTI as I have many times. I'm going to go take those flowers that we peeled off before, and I'm just going to position them in the empty spaces. I'm not filling all of the empty spaces because this is just one of the colors. I'm just doing my second color here. We'll have a third color in a little bit. So I'm putting a few there, and then I'm pressing that sticky piece down again to transfer it onto our little stamp over there. There's still enough stick there to do this. It really works well. Okay, so now I can go ahead and ink this up with my second color. For this one, I'm using Hero Arts Orange Soda. Just close it right onto position, and there we have our second color of flowers on the background. Again, we're going to flip it over and do the bottom half of the card and see how fast that goes. So I did a second color on all of my cards, and by the way, I have a list of the specific colors I used over on my blog. Now for the third color, those last little white spaces to fill in, I decided not to use the MISTI and instead use an acrylic block. So I just used some adhesive to just temporarily adhere one of my little foam die cuts to the acrylic block and use it as a stamp. So I'm using it as I would any kind of clear stamp, and it works great. So I can switch the colors. So I'm going through and I have this big flower that I'm going to stamp on all of the backgrounds with whatever color I want. And then I'll switch to some smaller flowers for the smaller areas. I think it's helpful in the end here when there's not much space left to just switch to an acrylic block and stamp here and there to fill in those spaces. I just use a stamp cleaner or an alcohol swab to remove that adhesive from my acrylic block when I'm done. Now finally, I took one of those tiny little flower centers, one of those tiny little dots, glued that onto an acrylic block, and I'm using that little dot to fill in any little spaces in the background and just to add some more of that third and color here and there in the background. Okay, so now I have all those backgrounds created, lots of them, all on these small cards. It's time to add the sentiments. So I have the sentiment that I showed you earlier in the video. I decided to cover all of that black cardstock with some Wink of Stella clear shimmer just to add some shine to it and really draw attention. That background's pretty busy, so by adding the shimmer to the black, it really kind of draws the eye to it. So here you can see the shimmer that you get from it. It's really nice. So now I can glue this onto the background. And I decided it needed some accents, so I die cut that same set of flower and leaves from some black cardstock, and I'm just gluing those over some of the flowers in the background just as accents. I'm going to cover those also with the Wink of Stella, and then put a little Hero Arts pearl right in the center. Decided to keep this very simple since the background has so much going on. And after we did all those backgrounds, you can see that it finishes up very quickly. I did several of the cards with this design, but for a little variety, on some of them I die cut a script U and added that with the rest of the sentiment white heat embossed on a black cardstock strip, just for a little variety. So there you have a way you can use your die cuts and craft foam to create background stamps. Again, you could simplify this by using bigger die cuts or less colors. If you're interested in the products, I link them below in my YouTube description. You can also click here on the top left to go to my blog. In the middle are 3 more videos that share techniques for craft foam or small stamps that you might like, so you can check those out. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video. Have a great day.